Hey, have you ever heard of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure? Okay, who am I kidding? Let's say you've never read the manga or seen the anime, and you want to start getting into it. You might ask a friend as to where you should start. Chances are you'll meet two kinds of people with different responses. Either A, the ones who tell you to skip to the future part since that's where it gets fun and interesting, or B, those who tell you to start from the beginning so you can understand the foundation of the series regardless of its shortcomings. While each scenario can work for certain types of people, sometimes I truly sympathize with B's situation, because that is exactly how I feel about Paper Mario. Wow, what a segue. Paper Mario is one of Mario's earliest takes on the RPG genre. While Legend of Seven Stars beat it to the punch as the first, something about Paper Mario as a whole made it feel like a more solid and cohesive RPG title in comparison. Whenever people talk about Paper Mario nowadays, chances are you'll hear them gush about its epic sequels or defecate on its pitiful follow-ups. Yet even with that said, I find that there's a severe lack of appreciation towards the original, which gave the series the acceleration it needed. Granted, we do see a lot of glitch hunting and wacky mods made up for the game, but the main game itself is just seen as a simple good game that doesn't need to be given more than 2 glances over. And you know what? I don't think that's fair. As someone who cherished this game dearly, I think I can see that this game has a lot more going for it than just a template for future games to surpass. So what is it about the original Paper Mario that's so special? Is it the battle system? Well, the combat is a simplified RPG with implementation of manual combat, making it more interesting. Though it's nothing new since Legend of Seven Stars did this concept first, albeit nowhere as tidy. Though to be fair, it does make for a pretty good setup to introduce first-timers to RPG, and is way more intuitive than 7 Stars. You can make the battles more interesting with the amount of badges to utilize, but the game isn't heavy enough in difficulty to encourage that all too much. Its characters are also a lot more on the simple side, with a lot of the partners not given as much personality and dialogue as they should. Again, this is further redeemed with future installments making the characters much more dynamic and interesting. Some of them even have really heart-wrenching story arcs. But that doesn't devoid the game from doing what it still does best. And in my opinion, Paper Mario's strongest point of charm all comes down to might as well be reviewing JoJo right now. The sheer design of the game's world as a whole doesn't seem to be brought up enough, especially given how often praised most Mario RPGs are for their worlds and stories. The main story is about as simple as it gets. Bowser gets a powerful doohickey and tries to kidnap Peach. Mario fights him and gets bitten by the Nugget Stick. So now Mario has to journey on to save the Star Spirits and defeat Bowser once again. It wasn't all that complex, hell even Mario RPG has more twists and turns in comparison, but it still executed well and possessed just enough nuance to set the standard for what's to come. But you know what they say, with simple story comes a brighter journey. Well, actually I'm not sure if anyone ever said that since I just pulled that out of my ass, but you get the idea. Throughout Paper Mario, you meet a lot of charming people living within the diverse and colorful societies. And these people aren't just toads. There's also Goombas, Koopas, Boos, Yoshis, flowers, penguins, and more. Each of these species live within a civilization of their own, and you get introduced to each of them every chapter. What makes this so great is that it's pretty much the first time the series has done this. In the average Mario game, all these species of characters are only seen as enemies. But here, you can see that they all have their own families, culture, and standards when it comes to civility and villainy. For example, Goombas are sort of a low-class society, with the good ones living in smaller villages and the bad ones treading the street like a brigand's road. The Koopas are seemingly middle class, having a more developed residence as well as a more organized criminal movement. The Boos are a bunch of pranksters haunting a dreaded mansion, yet despite that none of them are actively hostile towards Mario and are willing to unite with him against a common enemy. It's these kinds of unique portrayals that gives these seemingly mindless mook creatures more depth within the Mushroom Kingdom and breathe a lot of life to the world. Legend of Seven Stars only has one town that does this, and that is Monstro Town, a place where all the mook characters live in total harmony. While it's neat to find one town where all your enemies come together, it doesn't feel nearly as genuine as what Paper Mario came up with. Especially since every other town in here are just I mean, okay, there are tadpoles, moles, and cloud people, so there's some variety, but it's pretty far between. Future RPG Mario games do adapt to the variety as well, but out of all of them, I'd say this game still handles it the best. Thousand Year Door does still maintain the diversity with its locals, but the way it sets out the world is kind of like Dream Team in the sense that you kinda need to have experienced the previous installments to really cherish the homage this game pays to it. It takes the Monster Town approach of having the species all live in the same environment, as well as civilizations built for new species of characters. Super is nowhere near as friendly with how it sets up its world. While Flipside does have a lot of lore surrounding it, Almost every other area in the game feels underdeveloped as all hell. Well, not actual hell though, because that place is actually pretty spot on. But apart from that, most of the worlds are just sequential levels with very little society to interact with. When there are people to talk to, they're not all that memorable, partially due to how oddly stylized they are, and not in a good way. Sticker Star made an attempt to go back to the series' roots and focus on the Mushroom Kingdom folks, but it got a little too racist and made it seem like some kind of toad supremacy is going on. Meanwhile, most of the other species are sidelined as common mooks once again. You know, we played the spin-offs to take a breather from the mainstream formula, not get it tattooed on our eyes. Color Splash did try to fix that problem by giving us newer towns and places to explore, but it still didn't go far enough. So yeah, while you could argue that Paper Mario left a lot of room for improvement with its combat and characters, it still has some of the best managements of species-oriented society I've seen done with Mario RPGs as a whole. But you know what? Having a good civilization is only half of what makes the world of Paper Mario so investing. It also needs some solid and properly built environments to support it. And boy, does this game have a lot of that. I'll stick to it with all my merits. Out of all the Paper Mario games period, this game has the best level designs out of all of them. Although it's not because the game was hard to top, but more so that every other game in the series really fell flat with how they designed their levels in general. So what did the original do right with this one? Well, for starters, the structure of these levels leave a lot of room for exploration and puzzle solving. It's not just limited to the boss dungeons, a lot of the field areas have their own unique gimmick that fits well with the theme of the surrounding area. For example, going through a desert maze and discovering hidden secrets and landmarks, finding the right path out of a haunted forest based on environmental clues, exploring a jungle from land to water, solving puzzles and unlocking pathways across a world of toys and flowers, all and so forth. These mechanics are great because they utilize how the environment of every area could be handled as game mechanics. Not to mention they're executed in a way that's intuitive and easy to understand. Mostly. It's definitely more than what can be said for every other game in the series. Thousand Year Door still does try to have a design with its boss dungeons, but the overworld levels are barely existent. While the aesthetic of the locations are breathtaking, the lead architect for these levels probably went off to design the sewers from 2 Fort after this, because these levels all boil down to walking down a straight line back and forth with hardly any barricade to topple. It's so drawn out that it's not even funny, no matter how much the game likes to pretend that it is. Sure, the original has backtracking too, but at least you can tell that you made progress with every step and it's always keen to provide you with shortcuts to get through the otherwise tedious parts, something Thousand Year Door is too stubborn to provide. It doesn't get much better. You think Super, while being a platformer and everything, will actually have some good intuition with level design. Yeah, you really shouldn't expect much from a game that's essentially a visual novel in disguise. The game really doubles down on all the backtracking and convoluted puzzle solving. Sometimes 1 or 2 levels can be neat, but it's clear that the game doesn't seem to care much about making cohesive levels. Sticker Star's levels would have mattered if it didn't screw itself over by being a dysfunctional RPG to begin with. The Papercraft puzzles are nice, but they're no more than eye candy to distract from the game's repetitiveness. At least Color Splash did try a bit harder, so credit where it's due. It's a shame that most Paper Marios are really lackluster when it comes to levels. I know that in Thousand Year Door and Super's case, they want to focus more on the writing and the quips, but that's not an excuse to ignore such a crucial part of game design. To this day, the original stands firm with its really solid management of levels across the game. And with a great world coupled with great levels, there's just one more ingredient needed to complete the beauty of this game. So, pop that jukebox open and dance your legs! Hey, Gloomtail said it, it's gotta be cool. If we're talking stylized soundtracks, you don't get more classic than Paper Mario 64. The game's track overall feels like it's composed by a really cheerful band of mice, rocking some really soft but catchy selection of instrumentals. There's a defined use of flutes, trumpets, pianos, xylophones, and acoustic guitars across the board, and they all maintain a constant mellow, yet upbeat feel. Despite using the same instruments, every theme sounds very distinct and memorable. You can name just about any area or moment in this game, and I have no problems humming the hell out of its theme track. The enemy theme, the mini-boss theme, Pleasant Path, Dry Dry Desert, Shy Guy Toy Box, Bowser's Castle, and so on. Hell, the boss themes are practically etched into my brain. There's additional uses of instruments for more varied selection when it comes to the boss themes. The cackling in the Koopa Bros theme, the organ in Taba's theme, the drums with Huff and Puff, and the synth on Crystal King, they all stand out wonderfully. There's not even a contest when comparing this with Thousand Year Door. Although to be fair, that game has its fair share of hits like Rookport, Glitzville, and Poshley Heights, and battle themes like Hooktail, Duplis, Rock Hawk, and Smorg. But other than that, I cannot for the life of me recall most of Thousand Year Door's tracks. No matter how many times I hear Grodus, Shadow Queen, and Cortez's battle themes, I could never find myself humming them casually. They're not bad tracks, just not memorable, which kind of applies to most of them. I think it's because they use a lot of techno tunes, yet couldn't disguise how samey a lot of them sound in the end. Super definitely improves over Thousand Year Door by having much more distinctly composed tracks, and the music that's memorable can practically drill through your mind. Dementio, Count Black, Sammer's Kingdom, and all the space themes come to mind. Although it does have its fair share of forgettable tracks, while every track from the original remained thoroughly memorable in comparison. I didn't listen to Sticker and Colors tracks all too often, but I will say that I really enjoy the styles they went for with the tracks. Sticker has a consistent jazzy motive throughout the soundtrack, giving it that comforting mix of classic and modern vibes that always feels welcoming to listen to. Color has a very retro club style classical composition, and it kind of makes me think of Cuphead whenever I hear some of the more energetic beats out of the tracks. They're pretty good and well varied, although I will say that I definitely would have preferred them to borrow less mainstream leitmotifs. In the end, I still prefer the N64 tracks, but these are all a step in the right direction, which is the most positive thing I suppose anyone can say about the Dark Age Paper Marios. Man, now that I broke the whole series down, there sure are a lot of highs and lows in the series, isn't there? Regardless, my point stands. Paper Mario for the N64 does a lot of things right, and wonderfully so. From the world to the level designs, the soundtrack, it has all of them spot on, while future installments still find their fair share of hiccups to those. And really, I don't think it's fair to ignore these aspects because they're still essential keys to bringing an RPG world to life. If there's a future game that can capture a balance between great world design and gameplay, coupled with an enjoyable story and combat, it will make for a masterful Mario RPG experience. And you know what? There are games like that. The Mario and Luigi series. These games perfectly encapsulate amazing environmental and civilization design, as well as maintaining the classical Mario charm with great humor, amazing battle system, and rambunctious stories. They're everything you want to see in a Mario RPG, and more. Even though one is better than the other, it manages to keep a consistent flow when it comes to presentation that no one installment feels especially lackluster on any regard. Sadly, with the downfall of Alpha Dream, the series has pretty much come to a screeching halt. Nevertheless, it's nice to see that at least they left us with a spectacular banquet of games to remember them by. But what about Mario RPG as a whole? Paper Mario hasn't seen continuation in a while, but if intelligent systems can pull themselves together and follow the right track again, it's not impossible that this particular series can start over fresh again. Mario Party certainly proved it feasible. When Paper Mario does come back, let's hope they remember which game does what right, and take their positives to heart.